Another week of neurodiversity time with Amanda and Theo. Wait, what? Where's Amanda? Unfortunately, Amanda is a busy bee. So this week we've shipped in another bee, the Mike Bee of Bedford. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite, Theo. Really pleased to be here.
Love it, mate. So Mike and I had a lovely chat on my podcast, Neurodiversity, Eliminating Kryptonite, Enabling Superheroes. I also went on Mike's podcast a couple of weeks ago. So go and search that out if you want to see me chatting with Mike and some more detail. But today's going to be a bit more relaxed, a bit more fluid, a bit more about what's going on in the community, some of the stuff that's gone on this week. It's been fun and games, but part of what we do and part of coming here is to ask the tough questions. It is to have the debate. It is for me to have a bit of coaching from Mike for him to make me feel a bit better.
Make no promises on that.
Oh no, I need it, Mike. Pressure. So Mike, just for those who may not know you, give us a little introduction, who you are, what you do, what you're about. People are saying hi, by the way. Charlie, hello.
Hi, Charlie. Hi, folks.
Thanks for joining us. But Mike, yeah, give the intro, please.
I've got no idea what's going on in the chat, by the way. All I can see for people that are kind of watching this live and stuff is just me and Theo on a window, just kind of having a conversation. So
comments. There's a comment section. Click on the right hand side. You might then see the comments pop up.
Don't start asking me to multitask, Theo. That could end horribly wrong. So let's not go down that path.
I'll do the comments.
You keep your eye on the comments and let's do that. But yeah, so hi everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Mike Bedford. I'm the founder and CEO of Be Brilliant People Development Limited. I work in the space of neurodiversity and neuro inclusion with a particular focus on working with employers, leaders, and organizations to help build neuro-inclusive workplaces.
Brilliant. And you do a great job of it. And I got to experience about a 40-minute conversation around all of those wonderful topics, as I mentioned before. So just to say, Amanda's not here today, but we do have a special video coming in via satellite from Amanda. Well, it might be from my inbox or my desktop. But we got 3 minutes from Amanda later, where she's giving some wonderful thoughts around something that perhaps we should be considering and thinking about. So we'll share them towards the end of the show today. So don't forget, you can add your comments and we will deal with them as the show goes on and we'll chat about them and we'll engage with those comments. That's the point of it. But also, we have the Neurodiversity Time group where you can go and join that group. And as the weeks and months go on, we're going to get a lot of activity going in that group. Quieter conversations outside of the mainstream. So if there was things that you didn't feel you could deal with in the comments or you didn't agree with or you want to challenge or have a conversation around, then you can go to Neurodiversity group afterwards to do that. So let's get into it. Right, this week has been a bit of an interesting one. Right, we had the incredible Neurodiversity Celebration Week. Oh, we talked about that last couple of episodes. We've got Autism Awareness Day, the UN event, coming up soon. So there's plenty going on for us to get involved in and to go and watch and listen and engage in. But also we have business as usual, like the usual stuff that we talk about and engage in, and the opinions that come across the social space. Now, I'm wondering, Mike, it seems to me that some of the conversations that are now happening in LinkedIn, for me, feel a little bit more like the conversations that were happening over in Twitter. So what I mean by that is it's great that we ask the tough questions, that we engage. However, it's in a way that is enabling and accessible for people to get involved in that conversation and not disabling in the sense that people are being shut down and not being listened to and not being understood, which I sometimes feel it feels like in Twitter, where often actually people can hide behind a false name, account, or whatever. Therefore, they feel they can say a lot more than perhaps they will in this channel. But I'm seeing a bit more of that come across. What do you think about what we're currently seeing across the social space, specifically LinkedIn, maybe as a primary space at the moment?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I think I can definitely see an evolvement of LinkedIn. I think it's shifted a lot from where it was years ago, and it continues to evolve. I think it's becoming a much more socially engaged platform, I would say, where it probably started off as more of a kind of like professional place where kind of, the kind of traditional kind of like corporate Colin sort of suity type people hung out and kind of like chatted and connected, and it was just like an extension of kind of like face-to-face networking, but in a really kind of like formal corporate capacity. Certainly when I kind of first joined, I would say that's evolved massively now, and it's shifted much more into the kind of like authentic open dialogue space. I'd say it's probably still got a long way to go, and I think as with any social media platform, I think it's a learning curve, isn't it? And I think we have to learn how to engage with each other, but not at the expense of, as you say, Theo, of not disabling, but enabling people as part of those conversations. Because as you say, Twitter, which I do kind of go on Twitter, and
Same here.
I tend to kind of like block out the kind of noise of the kind of like the vitriol and the kind of anger that can be on there. And what I wouldn't like to see is the kind of anger and vitriol coming with that. I definitely like the kind of the fluidity of Twitter and the kind of in the moment responses and engagement. That's something that LinkedIn's nowhere near in terms of fluidity. But I think it's moving towards better engagement. But I still think what we don't want to do is we don't want to bring in the kind of, as I said, the vitriol and the anger that kind of is just absolutely all over platforms such as Twitter. Does that make sense to answer your question there?
Yeah, that's brilliant. So a couple of thoughts on what you've just said there is I remember when the streets of Cairo, right, became alight with protesters, right? For people who
Yeah,
remember that, when and Twitter lit up. For me, that was the moment. For me, it may, other people may find, but that was the moment when the streets of Cairo filled with people,
yeah,
protesters, and there was the moment of change and transformation in
yeah, yeah,
Egypt. And it Twitter became the kind of the place
yeah,
of information. Like it became the news, but over like almost
yeah,
like even the news channels were going to Twitter because that
yeah.
is where
Right.
you were getting on Twitter. You were getting
Yeah.
like somebody stood in the street going, "This is look at all this," and then the news channels were like, "Wow, that's quicker than we could get people on the ground." So
You know what?
it just went boom.
I agree with that, Theo, as well. But I think we have to be careful that freedom of speech doesn't equate to freedom of offence as well. So we still have to be respectful and mindful of each other, don't we? And of different people and differences of thought and different opinions. Doesn't mean we can just go around and say whatever we want, does it?
Also, on that point, it means that when people realize the power of Twitter, you can then obviously create situations that you promote. So you
Yeah,
could say, "Look at this thing happening here," in a very well produced way of something that may not actually be happening, and there then becomes the problem, and then there becomes the need for news people on the ground to come in and
yeah,
test and challenge, and governments and politics to get involved to make sure that what is being said is
yeah.
actually real, because it happened naturally, organically at that time. It was of the moment, but then when people see opportunity, and I think what we've got,
I've
Ben
just worked out
sharing.
how to change in the comments on, by the way, showing
Good.
my absolute Luddite techie IT skills there. But
Well, I'm going to share a comment from Ben here. I think LinkedIn has changed because workplaces have started to recognize that they need to
yeah,
be more inclusive. So
yeah, yeah,
people like us feel more able to share our day
yeah,
to day lived experiences
yeah.
as opposed to a very basic understanding of neurodivergence. Right. This is brilliant. And I
It's a
think
great point.
LinkedIn are doing a fantastic job of really enabling this. LinkedIn have recognized that they want to be a space for people to express real powerful opinions to influence. And I know LinkedIn are doing a lot of work around this because I've worked with them as part of the like creator program.
Yeah,
So like that is powerful. And if we embrace that and we do it in the right way, that is going to be really enabling for individuals within organizations, but also for organizations to start to make the changes they need to
yeah,
be
yeah,
more inclusive. What do you think?
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think that's a great observation and reflection. And yeah, I think Ben, you're right. I think there is that recognition now that I think that's I saw a saying somewhere that LinkedIn knows more about from an employer's perspective, LinkedIn knows more about your workforce than you do.
Wow, I imagine it does, because think of all the data that it captures. I mean, it's huge data sets when you think about it. Big data, I was talking about it many, many moons ago, but like we've moved beyond that in terms of not only do we have these big data sets, but we have the ability to make sense of them through AI and machine learning, which
Exactly,
is
and you think about the kind of the challenges that I'm from a HR background. That's kind of like I've spent 25 years in like the people space, and one of the common challenges in the people space is about kind of what's the challenges and how can we kind of like harvest like protected characteristic data so we can understand who our workforce is, and that's always been a challenge. But got to LinkedIn and people on Twitter or whatever, and people are quite openly sharing it, but yet they're not comfortable sharing it in the workplace setting.
That's a good point. Let me ask you something then, Mike. What I've recognized about the last week is actually there's a lot of vulnerable people as well. And I use vulnerable, that may be vulnerable in a wide variety of different ways, right? They may be vulnerable because what they're doing on LinkedIn may be what they're doing on Twitter behind another guise, but they're now doing it as themselves, and that impacts their personal brand. That impacts their ability to get a job. So we just, the data in the UK is almost 80%, almost 90%. I can't remember what the exact stats are that came out through the government data. And NAS also did, National Autistic Society did some things around it. Show that a high proportion of people on the autism spectrum who are autistic with a diagnosis are out of work, right? Now, that is not then going to be helped if individuals are not being protected and they're inadvertently thinking they are in some way, shape, or form because there's an influencer or somebody that is respect. They're commenting alongside somebody who has a lot of understanding, appreciation, knowledge, data to back it up. Their view may be coming with less of that, but it may put them in a position of danger. From a coaching perspective, Mike, tell us a little bit about what maybe some of these individuals can think about, what they can do. I know you're not nobody's coming back to you on this, Mike. I just think, I value your opinion, your approach, the way that you think. So what are some of your thoughts around what we share, how we share it, how we can consider the way that we show up for those people out there? Because a lot of people who join this call will be those types of people who are going out and sharing content and engaging with people.
Okay, and again, this is my perspective, and I don't expect anyone to adopt that perspective. It's my perspective. And my perspective is always to be your authentic self. And as someone who spent a long time not being my authentic self, I would say that was draining. It was physically draining. It was emotionally draining, and it didn't help me. It didn't help me get to where I want to be. It didn't help those around me as well. And you got to, from my perspective, again, it is teamwork, and I'm thinking about the workplace context here as well. How could others help me if they didn't understand? How could we work better as a team if there was no knowledge and information? And that's not about someone getting special treatment or anything like that. It's about creating a level playing field, because inclusivity benefits everybody, whether you're neurodivergent, whether you're neurotypical. So for me, I think being your authentic self is absolutely paramount, but I respect that that's it's not as black and white as that either. The conditions, the psychological safety, the trust, the culture, all those things need to be in place and need to be right too. So there's still a lot of work to be done within organizations, and leaders have a absolute key role in this within organizations to create that psychological safety and those open, honest and authentic conversations that enable people to be able to actually start being their authentic self, as they might be, as we've said here, on other social media platforms. But then when they get to work, they're a completely different person because they don't feel like they can be themselves. We've got to unlock and unblock that as well. And again, I feel like HR leaders, people managers, all have a critical and crucial role to play in enabling that, as do we. As the neurodivergent individuals as well, we have a crucial role in terms of being able to advocate so that we can be our best versions of ourselves as well. And again, I'm not saying that that's easy. That's quite challenging to kind of self-advocate and to do that as well. But you can only do that and be your authentic self, and thereby that's when you can grow and you can achieve, and you can really kind of fulfill your potential within the workplace.
That's brilliant. Really appreciate that, Mike. And let me just call something out. So this week, on that basis, to like go right to it, I was challenged on the use of the word evangelist, and to evangelize. And the interesting thing is, then I've gone and dug a bit deeper, and basically the origins of how the term evangelist or evangelism has been used, and how that has impacted on certain groups of people and how that makes them feel. And therefore I put a poll out, and the poll was about 60-40, don't use it, do use it. So 60% said don't use it, 40% said do, and it's about 400 people. And then loads of comments, right? But what was interesting is there's the different dictionaries and different dictionary definitions. The Cambridge dictionary definition's interesting, and that's got me thinking. Now, if you go to the Cambridge dictionary definition at the top, it explains evangelism or evangelist as a focus around promoting like technology, ideas, concepts. That's what it says. So it doesn't refer to religion at all. That's the Cambridge However, underneath that, if you scroll down, it shows you the US definition, and there is no explanation of it in that context. It's all religion focused. So that's interesting, right? So here in the UK, how the word sits at the top, it's technology, innovation, or whatever, evangelizing that. Yet in the US, that doesn't even exist, even though a lot of big US companies, tech companies, do use it in the first context. So it's just fascinating, right? And I'm still kind of mulling all of this over. My primary objective is not to hurt somebody, because I'm not somebody who would do something just for effect. I'm not, because I can't live. I wouldn't sleep at night. But I don't just want to make decisions based on what one person tells me I should be doing, because I made those decisions in my young life, and it didn't serve me. It didn't help me. So this is kind of what has become a fascinating exploration of the topic. But it just goes to show these different perspectives that can be evidenced and backed up. If one person can go and find this dictionary definition, one person can, and they can go, I've got the right one. No, I've got the right one. Oxford is more important than Cambridge. I'm throwing that out. Sorry, but I think in terms of what you've just said about helping people, one other thing I want to shout people out, right? Because every week we're going to shout people out, but I'm going to shout a lot of people out, and I'm not going to name you. A lot of people sent me private messages this week. A lot of people reached out to me to ask if I was okay, right? And to share love and respect. And that's why I did a post just saying I'm sending love to everyone. And that was powerful, because I wasn't sure whether I needed those messages. But I got those messages. And then, like when I say I wasn't sure, sometimes you don't know until after the event, right? Sometimes things hit you days, weeks, months later. From what you've just said, Mike, the wonderful way that you describe people can think about it, like we need to think about others in this space. And as a neurodiversity community, or whatever community you want to call it, or identify with, actually autistic, like really be mindful, no matter what your opinion, we're dealing with humans. And we're dealing with people who actually, in the majority, agree with you. In the minority, they may not agree with the phrase, the terminology, the fact that you smile and love it. And, you know, that's my old mask anyway, because that's how I deal with life and trauma, is I walk in with a smile. You just need to be aware and mindful of that. So massive thank you to everybody who did. And we need to pay that forward. So, you know, and Mike, you're an incredible human being as well. So I know that your values, you know, really match what we're talking about today. So anything else you've seen this week, Mike, anything that's interested you, anything you want to share with us that kind of is bubbling, kind of passionate about at the moment, that you're excited about?
Gosh, I mean, just one last word on language, I think, before we move on. I think,
of course, please do.
What the whole kind of, like you talked about the dictionary definitions and things, it just feels, and I didn't immerse myself in that whole debate as well. I purposefully stood back from it, and it feels a little bit like you say tomato, I say tomato, when I think about kind of like dictionary definitions and all this kind of stuff. But I let people kind of interpret into that what they want in terms of language use and things like that. And I think you're right. Just as a kind of final word on that, Theo, as well, in terms of how you treat people, and we don't all have to agree with each other. I think that we've talked about that on previous podcasts as well. That it's healthy not to agree with each other as well, because what we don't want is groupthink, and we promote actively, don't we, as neurodivergent people, that we want diversity of thought as well, but we must have it within our own community as well. We can't. It's hypocritical then for us not to have diversity in thought, and us being all of us, not to have that diversity of thought and difference of opinion ourselves as well. So I think, long may the respectful debate continue between all of us. But yeah, what's been lighting me up at the moment? I mean, there's so much, right? I mean, there's never a dull day. I kind of I often talk, and I know we've talked about this before, that we have there's perhaps 1 week a year for lots of people where this becomes a really important subject, but for the rest of us, there's 51 more weeks in the year where every single week is neurodiversity celebration week, right? So it's a constant. It's always evolving. It's always fluid. There's always something to do. We've all got a role to play in that, in whatever capacity we help make change, and we take our agenda and perspective forward. I think it belongs to all of us, and we all have a responsibility to take that forward and to own that as well. So I think every single one of us plays a valuable role in that. And I think for me, it's just I'm having lots of different conversations with lots of different people at an organizational level, some really wonderful organizations out there who are doing some really great things as well. So don't believe that organizations are not committed to this and aren't invested in this as well, because I just know from the conversations, and I'm sure you and others do as well, that organizations are. I think the leveraged interest and awareness is definitely growing, but I think it's about taking it past that point as well, past the conversation into tangible actions. And I know we spoke about this before, Theo, as well, haven't we? And for me, it's moving it past the kind of the information and the advocacy, which is really important, but to actually, okay, so what sits behind that? What actions? What happens next? What are you going to do about that? What's your 6, 12, 18-month strategy that sits behind that? What's going to change as a result? Who's going to be involved in that? Which neurodivergent people are going to sit at the table and help you actually put that into place and hold you to account on that? How many neurodivergent leaders are there in your organization that are actually self-advocating and creating that safe space and opening the door for others to be themselves as well? So it's a continued conversation, and it's a fascinating conversation, and it's one that's going to go on for some time to come, I think.
Absolutely. Within an incredible period of time. You only have to look for the thousands and thousands of people now getting involved in it. The 22 billion. I think sometimes I repeat myself, but the 22 billion views of the hashtag ADHD and the 21 billion views of the hashtag autism on TikTok is just an example of the future generation now is immersed in this topic.
Yeah.
And that is empowering, but it also can be misleading and misguiding, misinformation, disinformation, and it's really important we try and empower organizations and people with enough information that they can make their own decisions. That's key.
Yeah.
Right? And that we lead people in a way that's okay for them, because we think of the curve of going through transformation and change, right? That's effectively what we're going through here. And some people will take much longer than others to be able to move through it. I can move through things pretty rapidly. Through a whole day, I can, completely transform my views and ideas and thoughts. But not everybody can. We have to be mindful of that fact.
Yeah, it's evolving. I think it's an evolving beast. It's agile, and that term gets banded around quite a lot, but it is. It's agile. It's fluid. It shifts. It evolves. What's relevant 6 months ago might have changed substantially in 6 months' time, and so on and so forth. And we just have to keep ourselves as well versed on that as possible. And be prepared to unlearn what you've learned as well. I think for me, as a learning leader and as a leader in this space as well, it's really important to be able to unlearn what you've learned as well.
Brilliant. Right, thank you so much, Mike. Right, now we're now going to go to Amanda by satellite, kind of. So we're just going to get a few words from Amanda for a few minutes. It's something that we can consider before next week's show, and then we'll come back to Mike and I to kind of wrap this up. And then I've got to run off to the dyslexia show in Birmingham to do a talk there, which should be good fun. So anybody who's there, I'll see you in a bit. But let's go over to Amanda.
I'm sorry that I'm not with you this week on the podcast. It's been a really busy week and I'm traveling all over the place, and also on my way up north I've got a new grandchild in the offing that I'm going to spend a few days with my family. Just some sort of burning thoughts. One of the things that sort of happened this week that a number of times people have contacted me has been about times of transition. And I wonder if there's something we could discuss in a future podcast about why do we wait for things that we know are going to happen and get surprised that we're not managing when they actually happen. I had a parent wrote to me about planning for their child going to university and wondering about which university to go to and what course to go to, and how to get help and support to make those decisions. And it made me think back about, even at every stage, whether we're a parent of young children, or we've got children moving from primary school to secondary school, or you're moving from school to education, education to employment, we're really poor at times of transition. And if we think about it, I just think practically, if we can think of sort of 3-year units, where do you want to be in 3 years? Where are your children going to be in 3 years? We can sort of manage to plan for those transitions. So I wanted us to really think about how we could start that earlier. And because it's a bit like Christmas, it comes every year, but we're always surprised about it. We know that when our children are going to secondary school, we know when we're going to be leaving education usually, or when we're starting to go into employment. And I think that when I look at what the greatest challenges for people who are neurodivergent are, it is about knowing what's going to happen, because it's almost like other people have got a rule book to sort of know how to apply for a job and what to do in an interview and how to deal with unwritten rules. Yet actually for ourselves and our children, the unwritten rules, the sort of non-social activities, are often the ones that are the hardest. When we go into a classroom, or you go into secondary school, when you're trying to suss out when you walk into school and it's lunchtime, where should you sit? Who should you sit next to? When you're on the school bus, where should you sit? You shouldn't sit on the back row. Or who should you talk to? And those sort of unwritten social rules are the problems in workplaces too. So sometimes it is like the tea wars. Who makes tea? When should I go for a break? Is it okay to have my sandwiches at my desk? When people say dress down Friday, what does that really mean? And you get it wrong. Or understanding that sometimes when I'm sharing, I don't know how much to share. Should I share lots about my family and what's going on? Should I have told you about things that are personally going on in my lives, or should I hide that? And that social grading for lots of us is really challenging. So I just want you to think about this week. What happens? What can we do to make better transitions? And how can we get other people to help us prepare us for those times of transition so it isn't a mistake? So I'm sorry I'm not with you this week, and I'll see you next week in the podcast, but have a good cup of tea and a good conversation, and I hope you have a really good weekend as well. Thanks.
Amazing. Love you, Amanda. Brilliant. Okay, so transitioning. My daughter is about 1.5 years away from high school, and actually, we've been to the high school. We are talking to her current school about that move to the high school. And I think that's what Amanda's getting at, right? We really need to think quite far ahead. And it's not far ahead enough, with waiting lists at 3-4 years, those transitionary periods. I think you can never almost start too early. And yeah, so thank you, Amanda. Really appreciate that. And I just quickly share Charlie there. It's taken me months rather than weeks to settle into my new job. So really appreciate Amanda's point. That's a really good point, right? For a lot of people, ND people, the transition, but also the upskilling in terms of new technology, new environment, new people, new processes, new systems, takes longer. But when you got it, you smash it out of the park, right? But sometimes you because you don't get given the time for
Yeah.
transition, or you're not able to plan ahead, because sometimes you go from one job to the next. That's when sometimes we suffer. We may fail because the employer doesn't understand that, and therefore they just think, why is this person in 2 months not achieving what other people achieve in 2 months? Whereas if they wait 6 months with the right support, they'd see a different outcome. What do you think, Mike? Closing thoughts.
Of course. And yeah, here's one I baked earlier for this one. And I think it applies, and I think about that context. And I think it applies to kind of like the education, the social and the employment space. I think it comes down to three things for me: open, honest, and authentic conversations. And if those things are taking place, then you can put the rest into place, right? If those things aren't taking place, then you can't. And that's when the blocks and the barriers start to come up. And that's where things go wrong. But if you're having those open, authentic conversations, be that with teachers, with in the educational space, be that in the workplace with line managers, or be that in the home environment with your family. If open, honest, and authentic conversations aren't happening, then you've got problems, and that's where problems are going to occur, and that's where challenges and friction is going to happen. But if they are happening, you can put things into place to actually support that and to enable you and make sure it's never going to be perfect, right? Doesn't matter how open, honest, and authentic that, it might not always be perfect, but at least the conversations are taking place, and at least then things you can mitigate some of that risk.
Brilliant. And for some people, the challenge with the open, authentic conversations, open, honest, authentic conversations, is that they've been masking for so long that there's fear around if they become open and honest and start to have those conversations, they become vulnerable. And that is one of the difficult balances, and why the work that you're doing, Mike, and what organizations can do is really important, because it's helping the organizations support the individual to be able to have them in a way that they're not going to be that they're not going to face the level of stigma that they may have faced in the past.
The conditions have to be right, and that's what we've said throughout this as well. The conditions have to be right. They might never be perfect, but they can be better. And everyone has a role to play in that. We have a role to play in that, but then so do everyone else around us as well. And when the environment's right, then you can start taking steps towards actually advocating and asking for what actually, do you know what, I don't think this is going to work for me, but actually this could work for me. Could we make this work? That starts a conversation. Then you can start to put things into place and kind of work things out in a way that can help you achieve whatever that goal is that you're trying to achieve, right?
Brilliant. Lovely place to bring this week's session to a close. Go and join the Neurodiversity Time group on LinkedIn, because we can carry on conversations over there, or at least start to build a community where we can engage and start to challenge some of the ideas and concepts that we want to in a safer space. But otherwise, thank you so much, Mike, for joining me. You are incredible. You continue to be brilliant in everything that you do. And thank you for everybody joining us. Thanks for all the comments, the engagement. Big respect and love to the community, to everyone, and look forward to seeing you next week, same time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Theo. Take care.